So we're carrying a bed up 3 stories, me and this other guy. It's a little girl, and she looked at her father, and she said, "Is that bed for me?" And I learned quickly that this girl had never slept in a bed. She was probably 10 years old. The American system very much, especially in urban America, is broken. A lot of kids fall through the cracks. A poor kid often knows they're poor, and they have a sense of shame, right? So when they come to San Miguel, everybody dresses the same. Nobody can have on fancy sneakers. And now all of a sudden, the playing field is level. We're not judging each other by what we're wearing. That's a big deal in urban America, right?
Absolutely. And these kids are never going to be the same. They're not going to be like the other kids in Newburgh. They're going to be very successful, and they are very successful. And they're just good people.
And you bringing them to West Point, and by the way, Brian does this for our high school kids, right?
You looked it up. You did some research on snowboarding. And you said the most prevalent accident is with their wrist. And you probably said, right, well, there you go. That's for sure. Because you were like offish, and I'm like, what am I not seeing? What is the problem? Yeah. And then you said to me, I can't send my rows. I can't take the chance. And I said, oh, now it all clicked in the light bulb.
Call me out, Brian. Come on. But, in front of all these people.
You know, welcome to Bare Wires, and I'm your host, Brian Heyman. This is where we have unfiltered conversation for curious people. Tonight, we'll be talking about a very special place in Newburgh called San Miguel Academy. Father Mark Connell, the architect of this particular school in Newburgh, is with us tonight, and he's going to explain how education is the great equalizer for all these underprivileged children. We have an ongoing operation in Newburgh that has proven that with the right education, the right environment, and the right tools, anyone can succeed. I want to go start in the beginning, because it's important that I understand, how you grew up, where you grew up, and how you got to where you were, and that's part of the journey that we all go through. So, were you born in New York, or
born in New York State, Hudson Valley boy, Poughkeepsie?
Okay. Poughkeepsie.
When it was IBM territory.
So you're still right in the neighborhood, actually.
I am. Yeah, I'm in Hudson Valley.
And you went to school there, and at what point as you were growing up, did you say, "Oh, I want to be a priest"?
Yeah, I did the public school thing in Poughkeepsie, and strangely enough, I argued with my parents because they wanted me to go to Our Lady of Lourdes High School, and I said, "No way,
I'm familiar with
going to Poughkeepsie High School." And right after, we were competitive swimmers growing up, my brothers and I. So during high school, I got recruited by Marist College to swim, and that was my senior year. It was signed, sealed, delivered. I thought I'd be a swimmer at Marist College, and all would be well. And somewhere in that summer, between graduation and the start of college, I just knew something was off. And that's what we say is the call, right? Something was stirring in my heart that...
Did you go to Mass regularly?
Yeah. And probably it's good to understand, 2 Christian parents. Father was Roman Catholic, Irish Roman Catholic.
Okay, I'm familiar with that.
The name gives it away. And but Mom was a Congregationalist. That Calvinist branch of Protestantism. So we were raised really in 2 traditions. My mother promised, which they did in those days, that the children would be raised Catholic. But she was very serious about her own faith. So she taught Sunday school at the Congregational Church and was there every Sunday. So we always went with Dad to Mass. But on occasion, Mom would say, come on over. We have something special going on. So it was really a nice upbringing that we had.
There was no conflict there, huh?
There was no conflict at all. No, none that I remember. The conflict came in when I decided that I was going to go into the seminary. My mother's pastor would frequent his parishioners, and it was at least an annual event where they came to the house. And on this one occasion, after I had made my decision, my mother said, "Well, my son Mark is going into the seminary," and he didn't say anything. But that week, she got a letter saying, "A parishioner of mine should not have a son who would be a Roman priest."
Wow.
Yeah, he was old school Calvinist.
Wow.
And my mother, she was incredulous reading this letter. He basically threw her out. And it was a crushing blow for her. And so after that, she was kind of, floundering, started to go to Mass with my father. That was always his dream, but he never put any pressure on my mother in that regard. And up until my ordination, she was still not Catholic. And what happened after my ordination, she was so moved, she took instruction.
Okay.
And became Roman Catholic about a year after I was ordained.
Oh, that's a wild story there. Yeah, that's great. So you're in the seminary, you become a priest. I think you go to Newburgh after that, right?
So
where'd you go right after coming out?
So I went to the college seminary, which is out on Long Island.
Okay.
At the time it was in Douglaston, Queens, Cathedral College. Did 4 years there, and then they transferred us back to the Archdiocese to the famous Dunwoody in Yonkers, New York.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
So when you got out, you went to what parish?
So my first assignment was Holy Family, and in New Rochelle, New York. Yeah.
And how long were you there?
Well, I was there for 2 years. I thought I would be there a lot longer. But Cardinal O'Connor had other plans for me. I was there 2 years, and he made a phone call one day and said, I'm moving you to JFK High School.
Yeah, Somers.
In Somers, yeah.
I'm familiar with the school because we were involved with a program, an interchange program with Belfast, Ireland, where they would send their kids out for July.
Yeah.
You might be familiar with the program.
Yeah.
And we took part in the program. We weren't sure whether we were going to get a Protestant or Catholic. It really didn't matter to us. But we had to go up there to pick them up because that's where they got dropped off. And we happened to get a Catholic boy, and he became part of the family. I mean, he was still coming over. He already had grown out of in the program. They paid for the transportation the first year, but if you wanted the same boy back, you paid for the transportation. So he kept on going, and we have a place in Maine, so he loved that. And just a real quick story. He's probably like 14, 15 now, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm picking him up at JFK, right? He had to go from Belfast to London. He's probably on flying around all day. And he gets in the car and he sees wiped out. And, we're happy to see him. And I said, Ryan, I got some good news and I have some bad news. He goes, I said, what do you want? He goes, the good news. I said, we're going to go to Maine. And he goes, what's the bad news? I said, we're going right now. And we spent the next 8 hours. He slept all the way, but he woke up, we were in Maine. And but he was a great kid. We're still very friendly with the family. We've been over there a number of times. And he's a very successful biologist right now.
Wow.
And he loved that stuff.
Yeah, great stuff.
But that's how I know that school.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we have to drop them off and stuff like that. So I'm familiar with the school. I'm familiar with the area. How long were you there?
I was there for 9 years.
And you taught religion?
Taught religion and coached a few sports. And
What sports did you coach?
let's see, I did anytime they couldn't hire a coach, the AD would say, "You're doing it." So I did freshman basketball. I did soccer. I did the swimming team.
So you enjoyed coaching?
Oh, very much so.
I did a lot of coaching myself, and I haven't done it for a long time, but I miss it. I miss coaching kids. We'll get into West Point, but it brings back a lot of memories because I coached girls basketball, men's lacrosse, and men's football. So, as soon as I got out of college, I went right into coaching. But I loved it. It was great. And I think that you come from the same ilk where you love working with the kids and watching them progress. And we'll get into the extent of that in a little while. Now, you're at JFK, and you find yourself at the college there, right? The next place you go is Mount St. Mary College. St. Mary College.
Yeah.
And what were you teaching there?
So, it's important to know, Brian, and I'm sure some of your viewers will understand this. When you're a diocesan priest like I am, you don't choose where you want to go.
Right. Well,
you get a call and you're told, Mark, you're going to New Rochelle. Mark, you're going up to Somers. And then I got the call, just when you're happy and you think you're going
and everybody's
to be there,
happy with you.
Yeah. Then, the cardinal calls and he has other ideas. And he said, look, I have an opening to teach college up in Newburgh at Mount St. Mary College. So off you go. You pack your bags.
So you're teaching at Mount St. Mary College. Again, I'm very familiar with the school. We actually went up there when we were teenagers and, 18, 19 years old. It's totally girls at the time. I don't know if it's still totally girls.
No, it's co-ed now.
Okay. When I went up
You're dating yourself, Brian. That was back in the early 70s.
That's exactly when we went. But, you find yourself in Newburgh, which is a change for you. Now, you've been in different places. You're in Somers, a nice area. I don't know the exact conditions of New Rochelle. There's good, there's bad. But you find yourself in a pretty rough place, and that's Newburgh. All right? And, by all accounts, you're in the middle of, a war zone. So at what point do you say to yourself, I'm teaching here, and what's the transformation? When did you realize how difficult it was for these kids in Newburgh?
Yeah. Good question. Here I am in the classroom, right? And I'm one of the courses the college asked me to teach is contemporary moral issues. So a lot of that is about justice and giving back and the college is a comfortable place. It has a nice 10-foot fence all the way around it. And nobody really ever ventured into the city because you can get to the college right off the highway. But I started wandering around and seeing what was going on in Newburgh, and it was very unsettling. So you're saying one thing in the classroom, but then the challenge is I'm seeing the poverty that we're talking about in theory.
Okay, so now you have a conflict. You're really at a point, a crossroads in your life, and say to yourself, I'm okay here. I'm safe. It's comfortable. Colleges are very comfortable. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I had a very difficult time leaving college, but it's kind of like a bubble.
It is for sure.
So now you're out in the streets of Newburgh, and famous for it, probably one of the highest murder per capita in the country. And, at one time was a great city, but it fell on despair. And you have these kids out here doing it. Where did you confront this situation? I know you were walking around and seeing it, but is that what motivated you? Or was there a particular thing that happened that motivated you?
Here's the motivation, and you'll like this story, where you go on retreat a week before ordination, and you're with your classmates, and we happen to be in Larchmont on retreat. And typically the day before you're ordained, the cardinal comes up and tells you what your first assignment's going to be. So we knew O'Connor was coming up. The black car pulls up in front of the retreat house. The door opens, and the cardinal's in there, but Mother Teresa gets out of the car first.
Wow.
So we did exactly the same thing. Wow, Mother Teresa's here. She comes in, she prays with us, and then after the prayer, we all stood up to go for lunch, and she came over to me. And, she's this high. And she stuck her finger in my face. She pointed at me. And she said, "A priest should never be comfortable."
Wow.
And as you said, I ended up in New Rochelle. It was very comfortable there. Then I go up to Somers. Comfortable. College life. Comfortable. Then I hit the streets of Newburgh. Her words, I pretty much dismissed, right? They made no sense to me at the time. And then I went on to comfort. But those words revisited me when I saw what was going on and what I heard myself saying in the classroom. And Brian, one anecdote is the college was closing down a dormitory to refurbish it, and they were going to get rid of all the furniture. The beds were brand new. And I said to the facilities director, I said, "What are we doing with all the furniture in these rooms, the dressers, the desks, the beds?" So she said, "We did the numbers. If we store them, it's going to cost us more. Let's throw them away." So the dumpster was out there. I said, how much time do I have? She said, 24 hours. I got the kids. We got a box truck. We loaded.
The kids in the school?
In the college.
Oh,
okay. I got the college kids. Let's go, guys. We got work to do. And it's the first time they had been into the park. And we took one bed. A lot of kids in Newburgh, we have kids in the school. They don't have beds. They've never slept on a bed. They either sleep on the floor in blankets or they sleep on a sofa or a chair. So we're carrying a bed up 3 stories, me and this other guy. So a little girl upstairs, when we finally get up there, the father is there. And she looked at her father and she said, "Is that bed for me?" Now, my experience was every kid in America sleeps in a bed, right? That's what you presume. You grow up as we did. And I learned quickly that this girl had never slept in a bed. She was probably 10 years old.
Wow.
And that hit me. It really took me back to Bethlehem, right? How our Lord entered into our world.
Couldn't find a place to sleep.
In poverty. Yeah. And that's when my heart was touched. I was changed in an instant. And the words of Mother Teresa came back. "Mark, you can't be comfortable. That makes no sense." And I was at the time, I had been there, Brian, for 25 years. When you're a school priest, whether college or high school, you need a Sunday parish. So I had been preaching in Chappaqua, St. John and St. Mary.
Okay.
And I was there for 25 years. So I survived, I think, 3 or 4 pastors. So I was pretty much the steady influence in the parish, had made a lot of friends.
Very wealthy area.
Chappaqua is an incredibly affluent area. Right. I would tell them stories of Newburgh on the weekends, right? And the people were changed because why do you move to Chappaqua? You move because that's one of the top 10 school districts in the country. So when I'm telling them...
Among other reasons.
So when I'm telling them I'm in one of the, worst school systems in America, preaching in one of the best school systems, it was really the people. They came to me. They said, "Mark, we need to start a school for these kids."
Wow.
That's where the idea came from.
So you were telling them the stories that you were experiencing in Newburgh, that touched them. Did one person come to you? A group of people come to you? How did it actually manifest itself?
It was one single conversation with a family to whom I was very close, and they said, "Let's do this. We're going to have a dinner." So they had a dinner. They invited 50 couples, big house. Everything was catered. And I had known about this model that the Jesuits put together. It's known as Nativity. It's an intervention model for urban America to get kids who otherwise would be on the street and give them a positive.
And this is going on in other places in the United States?
All over. It was catching on, and I had read articles about it.
So this was based on that formula?
Yeah. So I was proactive. I called the Jesuit. I said, look, I'm getting together with these people, and they seem to be very serious about this. We might want to do this in Newburgh. Can you come and tell us about it? So he showed up at the dinner.
Wow.
And he brought a young man with him who was going through the program and was very successful wherever he was running his school. And of course, when the people heard him speak, they said, that's the ticket right there. And so that was really the birth of the movement.
Now, financially, did you gather money at that point from these people? And where was it housed originally?
Well, that's, the beautiful thing about Chappaqua is you don't move there if you're a failure, right? So these folks, they know how to get things done.
Right.
And so they I had all these Wall Street guys and professional men and women, and they knew what to do, right? I didn't have to do anything. It's, I helped steer it a little bit, but they said, we're going to have a dinner now. So we had this, house meeting. They said, let's throw a dinner. Let's raise some money and get this thing off the ground. We had our first dinner, maybe 250, 300 people showed up. We had $1 million at the end of the the reception.
So you raised $1 million, and I'm just trying to find the path, because now you have $1 million. How do you start gathering the structure of this and putting it together? You're dealing, even to communicate with the population that you're trying to communicate, had to be almost impossible just to get them to relent and say, yes, we want to participate in this, because they're afraid a lot of times from that situation. And so how did that manifest itself when you were like, how did you get the community, this particular community, to buy into what you were going to do?
Yeah. Great question. It's called a feasibility study to start a movement, and we wanted to be this nativity type school. So they had the template of how you go about this.
Okay.
Step number one, you have to do a feasibility study. So we had a bright young lady, a friend of mine. I said, Pat, this is all you. She goes, absolutely. And I said, look, this thing can't drag on. We got to get this thing open. I said, so you have, 6 months to get this done. And she rattled the cages and beat the bushes and made her way through all the religious congregations in the city, all the political leaders, law enforcement. I was working, because now you have to remember, I'm teaching at Mount St. Mary College, right? So I went to Sister Ann Sakak, phenomenal human being, right? The president of the college. And I said, Sister Ann, this is on my heart. She was like, these Dominican sisters love education, know how it transforms. She goes, let's do it. She was by my side. So she's running a college. Now she says, we want to be a part of this.
So talk me through the mechanics of how do you meet a group of them at a church? Do you meet a group of them at a community center? I mean, how do you start to go through the different layers and, okay, this person qualifies, this person doesn't qualify, especially in the beginning. After a while, I'm sure that you had some standards and some things that you went by, but in the beginning, who was the person making all those decisions?
The first question you ask yourself is there a need, right? We thought there was a need. Does the community feel there's a need, right? That's really what it comes down to. So it was usually me, and it was either Pat or Sister Ann or Sister Agnes. We would just go around, knock on doors. We'd call, make an appointment, knock on, say, look, this is what we have in mind. Do you think this community would benefit from this, right? So we went to the Black Clergy Council.
So you're trying to get approval from Newburgh itself?
You have to have buy-in from the community,
Okay,
right?
so-
They're your principal stakeholder, the community. We want to be of service to them.
Okay.
Do they want us to be of service?
Got it. So did you dealt with government agencies? You dealt with the community. You was a grassroots type of situation.
Yeah,
You talked to the
exactly.
community.
That's right.
You got a positive reaction to it. Now,
Not always.
okay. No, true. I can
Not
imagine.
always, yeah.
I can imagine that you had to fight uphill on certain things, people. But so you had the momentum behind you. Now you say, okay, let's put this together. What was the next step there? How did you go out and gather these kids? You must have said to yourself, this is the age we want to start this at, okay? Which is middle school, 6th grade, 5th grade, what is it?
The magic age. So nativity is predicated on, in urban America, for kids at risk, life-changing decisions usually occur around 10 years old.
Okay.
Right? So 5th grade. That was the nativity model says, if we're going to intervene, it has to be at the beginning of 5th grade, because after that it could be
might
too
have lost
late.
them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is pretty prevalent up there. So you have a starting point, 5th, and in the beginning, I believe it's all boys, right?
It was all boys because the presentation sisters were starting an all-girls school.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
And so this is 04, 05, and I said I went to the sisters and I said, why are we doing two things? Let's join together, make a co-ed school. You run the school. I'll bring the people in with the money. We'll get this thing going. They wanted nothing to do with co-ed, the sisters.
Wow.
They were hard and fast. They were solid on, this is just going to be girls, so you can keep your boys. We are not going co-ed. And I implored them 2, 3, 4 times to change their mind. They weren't budging. So yes, when we started in 06, when we finally opened, we were all boys. They opened all girls. They had been at it for 4 years starting the school. From start to finish, it took us 16 months because we said we have to open when they open. That the boy and girl programs have to open simultaneously.
So the building that you're currently in now, was that the building that you...
No.
Okay.
That's a fascinating story. I cautioned you, not everybody was interested in this program, and chiefly the Archbishop of New York,
Wow.
Cardinal Egan, was not happy. He actually said to me, Mark, we're in the business now of closing schools, not opening schools. So
Which has been the case for the last 15 years,
yeah,
for
right.
sure.
You know, so we're going upstream on this
Right,
one because they're struggling to keep their schools alive, and we're coming in saying, no, we're going to open a school, right? Nobody wanted to hear that.
But you weren't asking for financial support from them.
No, not at all. Not at all. But there were 3 empty school buildings in the city of Newburgh. So real estate, you know, when we, as you say, you have to have a place. And one day I got a phone call from downtown, and they said, come on down. Cardinal Egan wants you down here. And it was an ominous day for me, Brian. I went into a room, and there were 3 attorneys there. And they asked me to sign some papers saying that this program, whatever it is, we hadn't opened yet, would not ever reside in a Catholic building. And I said, okay, if that's what you want. And they felt that they were so opposed to it that they felt that they wanted nothing, no part of it. They weren't even going to loan us one of their buildings. So that was really unsettling.
Did you sign those papers?
I had to. I had no
But
choice.
aren't you in a building? Aren't you in a...
So
okay.
we ended up, and by the way, the girls' school met with the same resistance.
Okay.
So we both opened in 06. The girls opened in a Presbyterian church.
Right.
We opened in Methodist church. Pastor Sylvester McLaren, wonderful human being. He said, Mark, I got the whole second floor here. It's all yours.
Wow.
And it had classrooms, it was a school facility in a building built in 1860. And that was our first home. And so it wasn't until Cardinal Dolan came to New York, whatever that was, 14, 16 years ago, he heard about our work in Newburgh. He had 3 of them in his Milwaukee diocese where he had come from. He called me down. He said, I love what your folks are doing up there. He said, how about you take over one of our buildings?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that changed.
So he already was familiar with the program, saw what you were doing, and said, okay, it's amazing when somebody new guy comes in and says, has a different way of looking at things,
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So, so we ended up renting first the old St. Francis School, and in 2020, we purchased it from the Archdiocese of New York.
Now, in 2020, is that when you accepted girls?
It was right around that time as well, during COVID. The last parochial diocesan-run school in Newburgh closed because of the pandemic. And our phone was ringing off the hook. And I had a principal at the time, Frank, and I said, Frank, all these parents are like begging for their daughters to come here. Why are we not taking girls? He said, I don't know. So we had a board meeting quickly and said, look, there's a need. The need now extends beyond the boys. Let's go co-ed. And so, yeah, we went co-ed.
So when you look at potential students for this place, because it's a very special place, is there a criteria that you use, certain income, certain situations, one parent family? What is the criteria that you actually look at? Mm-hmm. Because it's such a unique place that, I imagine once you hear about this and you're in that situation, you're going to want your kid to go here. So, and you can't have all the kids there. So what do you use for a criteria?
Yeah, it's a very, Brian, remember, the Jesuits put this together, this model. We've tweaked it a little bit, but the whole mission of this Nativity Network is to serve low-income families, low-opportunity families, families who couldn't afford an option for their kid, even if they wanted one. So the whole mission, and it's stated very clearly in our charter with New York State, right? We have to get approved through state ed.
Yep.
So, remember, it's important for those viewing, we start the process at 10 years old, but we journey with them for 12 years.
Absolutely.
Right through college, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. So we are looking for, one, residents of the city of Newburgh. When we did our feasibility study, and it's all spelled out there in the research, the graduation rate for low-income boys in the city of Newburgh was 10%.
Oh, my God.
10%.
So obviously they landed on the street.
Yeah. So if you counted those who were incarcerated and got their GED, that number would go up to 30%. Okay. But the high school graduation
rate. So the prisons were being used as the high school.
Pretty much.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Pretty much.
So, it sounds like a devastating situation. So that's the criteria. I didn't mean to interrupt because I'm very interested, because it seems to me that there would be an overwhelming desire to go to the school, just from my knowledge of it. And you can't take everybody. The school's just not that big.
Right. So we look for the families whose children are not making it in the public school, which sounds really odd to a lot of people, but you have to remember the American system very much, especially in urban America, is broken. A lot of kids fall through the cracks. Right?
I'm in total agreement.
Yeah. So, those are the kids we want to serve. If somebody comes to us, and even if maybe they have a poverty level income, but the kid is getting all A's, well, the response is, he's doing fine. She's doing fine. Stay where you are, right? We want to serve the kid who perhaps will not make it if there's not a change. Okay. So we look at that very carefully. It would be easy to cherry pick and to take, to up your odds of eventual success by taking kids who are already doing well. We don't do that for the most part.
So do you look at their marks? Do they go through an interview process?
Yep.
Because I'm just trying to figure out, because, I'm familiar with the kids of the school, as you know, and I'm just trying to figure out how they get into this position, because this position is such a good position that their whole lives are changed, and we'll get into that in a little while. So if I was a parent in Newburgh, I'd give my right arm to have a kid in this system, but I may not be able, because my income may be a dual income, and my kid's doing okay in school, but that's not really okay with me. I'd want them in this school just by what the school has demonstrated. So you have to say no to a lot of people.
We do, Brian, and and you articulated it perfectly, right? We do have to look at the income, and if the family is making $125,000 and they can afford a private school education, and there are a couple of private schools in the area, we would refer them to those programs, right? Where our mission is to serve families who could not otherwise afford any option and are really frustrated that they know their child has potential. It's not being realized. Those are the kids we want.
So is there a fee or tuition for the school?
Buy-in's important, right? So we ask a minimum tuition from the families, $50 a month. Everybody has their pride, and we're all in this together. And the families, for many of our families, that's a struggle, coming up with that $50. That's a sacrifice, but they're making that sacrifice for their child.
Well, you mentioned
we know they're buying in.
Yeah, you mentioned something very important. The financial buy-in is one thing, but they have to buy into what you're going to do as a family. I mean, these kids you're going to be disciplining these kids. You're going to be making them accountable, and they need to understand before they go there that this is the system that they're going in. So you need to really have an emotional buy-in from them, that they say, listen, I'm going to back this system, no matter what. It doesn't go, well, they did this and they did that. This is the system I'm putting in. It's demonstrated that it's successful, and I'm buying in full. So when they say something to me, I'm going to abide by it. For example, we want your son to be on the rowing team. We'll get into that. They're buying into that. They're saying to themselves, okay, that's what school wants. That's what we're going to do. I got to have a question. With all the compassion, the difference, people want to be compassionate, but sometimes being compassionate is not the best for that child, okay? How do you balance being compassionate for these kids and yet making them accountable in a world that's going to be very difficult for them going forward? I see sometimes in schools that, teachers want to be compassionate, and I'm all for that, but they're really doing an injustice to that child. So there's a line you have to draw sooner or later. How do you make that balance? These kids come in, they're in a rough situation. You want to be compassionate, but yet there's got to be discipline. There's got to be accountability for them to succeed. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, right? That emotional part of it, and that's part of the intake and onboarding process, right? We take the families around the school. The messaging is obvious.
Right.
The messages are on the wall, hanging from the ceiling. We ask them to view all of those. Do you believe that? Is that what you want for your child? Do you believe, to be early is to be on time. To be late is unacceptable. is that okay if we teach that to your child, right? The only disability in life is a bad attitude. Do you believe that? So the truth will set you free. So there's a whole value system that goes along with our culture. And so we ask our parents if that's what they want for their child, and every parent wants the best for their children, right? And they all say, of course, that's what I want for my child.
But you're 100% right. But I live in an area, Haverstraw. We are very familiar. I grew up in Haverstraw and ran around those streets. That's where I went to school. They want that, but when they're in that environment, they don't foster that. Okay, they foster speaking Spanish, they foster their culture, and they foster them being, in that culture, which is fine. What I find and what I've seen in this school is that you basically have taken them out and separated them in a kind of a different world. Frankly, those kids don't speak Spanish in school. They're not carrying phones, and a family has to buy into that, okay? They have to say to themselves, no matter what we think, how we want to bring them up in our culture, this is the best thing for their future. And I'm sure they have a lot of conflict with that. I mean, your success, probably goes a long way in them making that decision. But it always intrigued me how you were able to do that. And if you can do it, why isn't it happening somewhere else? Or all places for that matter. Understand that, yes, you keep your culture. Just like when your parents came to this country, my parents came to the country, we all kept our cultures. We still have our cultures. There's festivals for the Italian and the Irish and everything. These are our cultures. But we had to adapt to the culture that existed for us to progress and to move forward and to grow and to accomplish stuff. And there's a conflict a lot of times where they think that this is the best thing for them, that they don't need to leave that culture, and they don't manifest that. In this school, it seems like, and the best way I can explain it is you pick this child up out of poverty, out of their culture, you put them in a new environment, and that environment has to be the strongest environment that they're going to adapt to, because that environment is going to take them somewhere that this would not take them. Okay. So, for a family to buy into that, that's a big deal. That's a big deal for a family to buy into that. But they know that's the best thing for the kid, and that's been demonstrated.
Yeah, and it all goes back to what you had mentioned earlier on. Newburgh is a highly violent, volatile environment, and people tend to focus on the differences. You have your multi-generational poor in the city of Newburgh. 3-4 generations they've been there, and they still are affected by the poverty. Then you have your immigrant population, and never the two shall meet. And so if we continue to emphasize what's different about us culturally, we're never going to create the unity that we want. So we don't talk about all the differences, religious, ethnic, color. We don't talk about that at all. We talk about, what's your dream? Why did your parents come to America? What can America offer to you if you've been here and haven't made it yet? That's what we talk about. That's called opportunity, and that's what we focus on. And so we can't be all things to all people. We have one message: you're in a great country, and there's a lot of opportunities there, and there's a lot of doors if you're willing to work hard. We stress, this is on you, not us. You have to do the hard work. But if you do, we'll make sure the door's open for you. Right,
you'll have access to that opportunity.
Exactly, it's all about access.
And one step further, it's a middle school, but you follow these students, and I've worked with some of them all the way up through college. So explain how that works.
Well, it's a 12-year program, right? So, the mission is very simple, right? It's one sentence. We're breaking the cycle of poverty through education. It doesn't get clearer than that, right? That's what we do. We don't apologize for that. We don't equivocate on that. That is our mission. That's what we told New York State we're going to do. That's what we tell the families that we take into the program we're going to do. And that's been a marvelous tool for us, because as you give the child the tools they need to find success in America, the whole family gets lifted up, Brian. That's one thing that I don't think any of us envisioned over 20 years ago, that the whole family is impacted. We've seen this dozens of times over now. A successful child can lift up the families. We have mothers now who want to go to college because the kid went to college, you know? So that's been the kind of the collateral effect of this whole thing.
Now, how can we, it seems this system's working on a very small scale, let's be honest, okay? And we have these schools throughout the country that seem to be going the other way. They want to meet these students where they are, instead of bringing them where they should be. They want to meet them where they are, which I believe is a misjustice to them, okay? That's just my personal opinion. But, getting involved with you guys a few years ago through Hal Roth, shout out to Hal. I probably wouldn't have met you unless you came to the bar group meeting, but I was very clear with Hal when I spoke to him. I said, I'm a big believer in education being an equalizer in society.
Yeah.
And, I've always felt that way. Not just education, but education being the main factor, the ability to get out of poverty that way and get out of what you say, the cycle of poverty. And that school has demonstrated. Matter of fact, I remember showing up there when I first went there. I'm going through Newburgh. I'm pretty familiar with Newburgh, so it didn't surprise me where I was or anything. And but I went to the wrong door, or the side door, and I was buzzing or knocking on the door, and they sent down this boy who was black, and he answered the door, and he looked at me. I knew it was a special place because he looked me right in my eye, said his name, and I'm a student at San Miguel's, and I said, "Wow." That's a big deal, because the kid sees what's going on around him, but yet can come to this oasis, and there's a whole different world out there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one of the main things of San Miguel's that I'm thrilled with is the rowing team, which is dear and near to your heart. Tell me how the rowing team helps you prepare these students for the rest of life.
Well, we have them 1/3 more time a year than the public school. All right, so we go 6 days a week.
Okay.
We go 11 months a year. So the contact hours are greater than...
Which is a big plus.
Huge, right? Huge. And so we spend a lot of time together. That fosters the bonds of trust. But you got to fill those hours with something meaningful. It can't be a desk and a chair at all times. So you have to have athletics and other activities. And we have a wide range of those things. And sports are important, right? Sports are
team
to put
building.
it simply, it's a character formation program, right? You know that. Yeah. And what forms character better than athletics, right? And we tried everything early on. Somebody said lacrosse. Lacrosse will be it,
I had that conversation with him.
Yeah, when you teach a 12-year-old how to play lacrosse, and his first game, he's playing kids who, have had a stick in their hand since they were 4, So we got beat up pretty bad. I said, this lacrosse isn't looking good for us. And I had rowed at Poughkeepsie High School briefly for a year. And I said, gosh, I just think rowing could make a difference. And here we are on the banks of the Hudson River, and we do a lot of learning on the Hudson River.
Were you familiar with rowing at the time?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So did you ever row?
I did. I rowed 1 year.
Okay, so you knew.
Yeah, 1 year in Poughkeepsie High School.
Okay.
That was it. I knew enough to be dangerous, but I also knew enough about the sport that it could be transformative. There's a lot of research around rowing, and,
I'm sure.
and what it could do, the brain science of it all, and so forth. So I brought this to my board of trustees, and they pretty much had a paddy wagon outside the door after the meeting.
It's an expensive sport to get
they
involved
wanted
in.
to take me to a mental hospital. Yeah,
It's not something you're just going to throw a uniform on and go.
You've had a lot of good ideas, Connell, but that's not one of them, you know. And I said, give me a shot, right? And there was one guy in the room, believe me, and gave me a few bucks, and he said, go buy a boat. And we bought our first boat, and that was in 2009, I think. And
now, is this did you race nationally, right?
No. Well, we do now,
right.
but back then, you know, remember, what do we want to do, Brian? We want to dress them up during middle school, right? Polish them up.
Right.
We get these diamonds in the rough.
Right.
Now we got to polish them up by 8th grade. We want to get them out of the city of Newburgh. That's where our success comes from, right? When they can move on to a new environment and discover the world beyond Newburgh. So we embarked on, in our early days, placing our 8th graders in boarding schools. And the boarding schools were willing to accept them. But they wanted them to give something to the community, right?
How just to go back, you have them going to who was footing the bill for these boarding schools? Were you giving them financial aid or scholarships, or how does that work?
I knew nothing about boarding schools, right? I went to Poughkeepsie High School, right? So, but we had a couple of ladies, Kathy Wooters and Lauren Steers. They knew about the boarding school world, and they had been volunteering in the school, but they both knew about boarding schools, and they really designed the program and set it up before our first class graduated in 2010. And they did all the legwork. And what I discovered was, you know, we think of the boarding school world as a bunch of elites, right? Which it is predominantly. But the boarding school world also recognizes that if it's just privileged children, they're not getting a sense of the real world.
It's a monoculture.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want a monoculture.
No. And so, you know, they were looking to be more heterogeneous.
Right.
And so welcoming in, and there's all kinds of programs in New York City,
there's
right?
all kinds of research that say that's the way.
Yeah, you want to diversify your population. So, you know, we got in under that banner of let's give kids who couldn't afford this scholarships.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and what sold our program in the beginning, people like Newburgh, San Miguel Academy, they didn't know what we were talking about. They're used to these glitzy New York City programs. And but after we placed a couple of kids, they came back and said, these kids are extraordinary. We've never seen anything like this before. And we were supporting them financially and emotionally, and you know, so we see ourselves working as a team.
So they go to boarding school. Now we have to talk. Okay, so that lays a great foundation for the next step. How often do these kids go on to colleges? What's the percentage of these kids leaving high school and going on to college?
Yeah. So,
or somewhere it's equivalent.
The numbers are changing.
Okay.
Since the pandemic, right? And simultaneously, the college conversation is changing as well. So though we stress the importance of college, right? Higher education is, if you want to extricate yourself from poverty, get a college degree. Right. You're not going to be poor anymore, right? So we know that for a fact. The data is there. And so, but we also recognize that college isn't meant for everybody.
Right.
So we work with the Bruderhof community here in the Hudson Valley. They have a great program up in Esopus, New York, where they were receiving some of our kids, teaching them the trades. So we have never been, you know, an assembly line just to higher education. So to answer your question, about 70% of our kids will go on to attend college. Of the remaining 30, a small percentage will go right into the workplace at 18.
Okay.
Some of them will go into the trades education, and we have programs set up with that. We work with the Council of Industry. We work with Alfred State University. So we have programs around trades education. And then some of our kids will enlist in the military. Others will use ROTC to access higher ed.
Right.
So, it's a blend. It's a blend. What we're seeing now is the whole college conversation is changing,
Yeah.
right? And, so you've seen that. We have a middle school aviation program. I don't think anybody else is doing that. We have flight simulators
amazing.
and
Yes.
real pilots teaching aviation. Why? Because that's where the jobs are going to be. That industry is in dire need. We have Stewart Airport down the road. We have Glenn Fraser over there in the Tuskegee Airmen offering a great pilot
Very
training
impressive
program.
Yeah.
So we're always pivoting. We're never one thing. We're always responding to the need. We're sizing up what's happening in society. We're looking at the research.
Where the need is.
Yeah, where the need is. We want our kids to be gainfully employed in the 21st century. Otherwise, why do this, right? Their parents are struggling. They don't have the education to move forward with their careers. We want them, and it's the only way you can do that and break the cycle, is to get the education and put them on a path to a good career.
Let's go back to the rowing team. You are the impetus of the rowing team. There's a certain amount of boys that do this, and you compete. Do you compete nationally with the rowing team?
Well, they tell me, Brian, we're the largest middle school rowing program in the country. We have all our kids row, right?
And do you practice on the Hudson?
We practice out of Cornwall on the Hudson, out of Donahue Park. The folks there have been phenomenal to us. We row on the Hudson River, the mighty Hudson, not an easy body of water to row on.
Not at all.
And, we don't have a boathouse. We don't have any luxuries. We trailer every day. The kids have to rig the boats every day. That's the magic in the whole thing. Yeah. That's the magic, right? Because they have to work together. They have to be collaborative. They have to look after each other. They have to learn to swim and know how to survive on the water, right? Poor kids don't learn how to swim, many of them. So, that's another tool in their toolbox. So, it just, the rowing is magical. We are working now with U.S. Rowing. We're having a few conversations and if there's anybody out there in your audience that knows a PhD student that's looking to do a study, what I know and what I've read about is at-risk kids born into poverty, are very often lacking in the executive functions, right? That whole idea of being organized and planning ahead and working with others, they don't see that, right? So it's not something that they naturally absorb as they're growing up. And I see rowing teaches them all of the executive functions. And I'm looking for somebody. I have all the data in my head. I just don't have the time to sit down and process it. But if there's somebody out there who wants to do that, it would be a brilliant study of how you can take a kid who's lacking in so many of these areas, put them in a boat or put them on the erg, and it's completely transformative.
Yeah, they're forced to deal with a lot of problem situations. They need to be organized. They need to be cooperative. These are all skills that you need in the workforce to be successful.
Exactly.
And you need to be able to communicate. You need to be competitive. These are things that don't come natural to these kids, and if they're in that situation, they get to experience it, and when they're in a different situation, those tendencies seem to shine.
You got it.
So I found that to be, teaching the kids with snowboarding. I have the kids up at West Point. I have a group of them. First of all, they're the nicest kids in the world, and I love doing it. But just to go back a little story, I had these twins. What are their names? Chris and...
You had Christian and Christopher.
And we were teaching snowboarding. They were with us all year. By the end of the year, they were ripping down the mountain. And And we always referred to them as the twins. We always say, oh, yeah, the twins are here, or, the twins are up on the mountain, blah, blah, blah. And they never, we always talked in front of them. We'd eat lunch, and, we'd make fun. The twins are here, blah, blah, blah. And they never stopped us. They never said a word to us. I come to find out all three of them got into Annapolis, and they're triplets. And they never stopped us from calling them twins. And I'm like, I didn't find that out until I saw the picture of all three of them. And I said, we were working with these two kids. They never even said they had another brother. It was amazing. But I just want to point out it's very difficult to get into Annapolis by yourself. But to have the three kids go in the same year is almost impossible.
Yeah.
All right. And, it was really impressive to have all those three kids get into that school. I know they're doing well. And there's a lot of success stories in San Miguel. It's frustrating to me sometimes when I look at you and what you're doing, because I know it can be done. I just don't know if it will be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that Brian, that's the magic in all of this, right? What we're doing is not that difficult. The problem in urban America is that our schools are too big for many of our children who are at risk. They fall between the cracks. And if our school leaders, thought leaders, could break these schools down into smaller pieces and give the kids what they need, the individuation that we do every day, right? We are not a one-size-fits-all, program, right? We meet the kid where they are. We say, okay, this is the potential. What are your dreams? Let's go.
But you have guardrails too, and I think that's what these schools are lacking, the guardrails. There is a certain accountability these kids have.
Oh, totally.
I've watched it,
Yeah.
I watch it. I watch how they greet people. I watch how they conduct themselves. I watch how they speak. These things are not just given to them naturally. These are taught. They're guardrails. They're standards that they have, which you don't find in any school anymore. And I think that's a real problem. If we could take this system that you have and put it into a school that can mimic it, it would be great. But I don't see it happening. I don't know how you're going to reproduce this on a larger scale.
Brian, everything we do is replicable. I say to my staff all the time.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, no, it is, because it is, right? And we do it for half the price of what Newburgh. We spend $13,000.
Don't even get into the budget of this.
So we spend $13,000 per pupil per year, and we're going for 6 days a week and 10 hours a day. So it can be done, and it is replicable. And you just have to downsize what you're doing. If you put these kids in big buildings, they're going to get lost. A poor kid often knows they're poor, and they have a sense of shame, right? So when they come to San Miguel, everybody dresses the same. Nobody can have on fancy sneakers. Yeah, they have to be black or white, and they have to be simple. And now all of a sudden, the playing field is level. We're not judging each other by what we're wearing. That's a big deal in urban America, right?
Absolutely.
I don't care how poor you are. You got to have Nike this and Nike that. And so we take that off the table. And then the next thing we say is, you're important. You're a child of God. You are here for a purpose. God put you here for a reason. Let's kind of figure out that purpose together, and let's get you there, right? And your name is important. So when you look at Brian Heyman, look him in the eye and tell him that you're important by giving him your name. And all of a sudden, that sense of shame diminishes, right? I'm like everybody else. I'm no different. And so when you take that off the table and tell them that they're full of potential, a kid wants to hear that. A kid's going to buy into that. And I think that's a large part of our success.
I just don't know how we're going to replicate that in today's society, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's countering that. They're talking about, okay, we need to let them do this and let them do that and let them But what I believe it's doing is a disservice to these kids, because in life you have to be accountable. Life's not easy, okay? So for you to say it is, and you don't have to do this, and we're not going to make you do that, you're really doing them a disservice. You know, these schools, you know, I'm just talking about the schools around here, have all these classes, and which impressed me, you know, English as a second language. They're speaking Spanish the whole time in school. They have Spanish-speaking teachers that teach them in Spanish. What are you telling that kid? That you could survive in this country doing that? And they're doing them a disservice, you know? And they're not going to be as successful as they can if they were taught English, and because this is the country you're living in. So I see that happening all the time. And that's what I want to go back to my question. Compassion and discipline, there needs to be a balance, okay? And that's what I see at San Miguel's. I see compassion for these kids, real compassion, that you're making a difference, but yet you're doing it in the structure, accountability, and these kids are never going to be the same. They're not going to be like the other kids in Newburgh. They're going to be very successful, and they are very successful. And they're just good people. I've been working with them. And we every Sunday, I can't wait. And the guys I teach with, my instructors I teach with, who happens to be my son-in-law and Corey Ray, who built this, you know, they can't wait to get there, you know, because we love working with these kids. And that's the feeling I get when I'm in that school. It's a very special place. I just hope one day that we can repeat it on a much larger scale, and people start to understand that, you know, it's okay to be nice, but you have to have accountability. You have to have discipline, because that's how you're going to survive. That's how you're going to succeed. And that's what you teach these kids. And it's very evident when you walk through that school. Those kids, 5th, 6th grade, are looking you in an eye. Never met you before. Look you in the eye, shake your hand, and you know they're confident. And then you follow them through high school and into college, and you make a real commitment to them. And that's another thing, you know, when in these schools, you know, you're going from one grade to another, it could be a totally different situation. There's no follow through. You're not progressing with the kid at all. It's very compartmentalized, and those compartments can be totally different from one year to the next. So I can't tell you how impressed with the school. I've talked to hundreds of people about it. I'm glad I got involved with you guys and the school itself. It tends to give me some confidence in the future that these kids are going to be around. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and doing the podcast and explaining to the public what's going on here, because it's a very special thing that's going on. I just hope it can be replicated.
Well, you know, and Brian, you know, your part in this, right? And that is the story of San Miguel, right? I get to do the podcast, but, you know, behind the scenes, you have all these players on the stage, right, who are doing exactly what you are talking about. They're building up these kids. They're giving them the confidence they need to be resilient, strong, respectful people in this country, right? It's not hard to do. And if we do this together, right, and you bringing them to West Point, and by the way, Brian does this for our high school kids, right? I think we were going to start with the middle schoolers, and I said, I don't know, let's rethink this.
Well, you didn't want your rowers hurting your wrist.
I didn't want to hurt my rowers either. That was
another. I couldn't get any rowers. You looked it up. You did some research on snowboarding. And you said the most prevalent accident is with their wrist. You probably said, right, well, they ain't going. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, when you have a nationally ranked team, you don't want them.
I know. Yeah. And it made all the sense in the world to me when you finally told me, because you were like offish, and I'm like, what am I not seeing? What is the problem? Yeah. And then you said to me, I can't send my rowers. I can't take the chance. And I said, oh, now it all clicked in the light bulb.
You called me out, Brian. Come on. But in front of all these people.
You know, the idea of what you're doing up there is just amazing. I am so glad I met you. I'm so glad I got to experience the school, and I'm working with the school now. I just hope from the bottom of my heart that this whole type of teaching comes more back to, instead of where we're going now in today's teaching, and I have a teaching degree and I watch it every day and I see it happening. I just hope it comes back to understanding that discipline, accountability are the things that are going to make the difference for you in the future. Although they may be hard, life's hard. Okay, so if they don't have it, it gets very difficult.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Right, thank you very much.
And may I say to your audience, if anybody wants to visit, give us a call. As you know, our door is always open. We love to have visitors. And we do have great kids, Brian. And thank you for what you've done for the program.
We're going to put the link of the San Miguel's onto the podcast. There'll be a number of other B-rolls, what we call them, pictures of San Miguel. You're going to have enough information to get to San Miguel's and talk to Father Mark whenever you have the opportunity. But this is unique in a very unique place, and I just wanted to bring this story to you.
Thank you, Brian.
Again, okay?
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.